In this video, I'm going to be reviewing and comparing some of the top Xbox controllers on the market from some of the brands you see on screen here. What's up everybody, I'm Blitz5 and hope you guys are doing well. And because I stream almost daily over on Twitch, I go through a lot of controllers, which has enabled me to test out many of the options out there and also make this kind of video. However, I don't own every controller on this list, and I added a few bonus controllers after I reached out to the Twitter community to see what kind of controllers they use. Also, lastly, as a disclosure here, I use PowerA as my main controller, so recently I reached out to the company and I'm now affiliated with them, but this video is not sponsored by them in any way, shape, or form, and I promise that I'll give an honest review, both positive and negative, for all the controllers, including PowerA, and we're gonna start with them first. All right, so first up on our list is the standard PowerA controller, and this is the least expensive controller on our list, coming in at a price of $30 USD. And one of the reasons why this controller and most of PowerA controllers are so inexpensive is because they are wired only and do not have a battery on the back. So for a lot of people, this is going to be a huge negative feature because in 2022, in the future, I know people like to go wireless, but for me, I do not like dealing with batteries and having to recharge that. I like knowing that once this controller is plugged in, it's always going to work. So for me, this is a huge positive, and I actually use PowerA controllers all the time. They're my go-to controller, but I actually can't recommend this version, and I'll tell you guys why. But first, let me tell you guys the features. So there are no trigger locks on this controller, but on the back, there are actually two buttons, which is really nice for a controller that's $30. And this is a great way to also test out if you're going to be able to use buttons. This is kind of the future of gaming, is having buttons on the back. And for me, I could not get the paddles down, but I was able to learn how to use these buttons because they're very easy to use and they don't get in the way of your fingers. I very rarely hit these accidentally, if not almost never. And you set these buttons by using this middle button in the back. And then, like I said, there's no trigger locks here, but if you go back to the front, there's actually a very nice feature where you have the volume adjuster and you can actually mute your mic right here. So you can go left to mute yourself, to lower the volume, right to raise the volume, and then you can click down to mute yourself. What's very cool about this is if you're a first-person shooter or playing a fast-paced game with your friends, a lot of times you're fragging out, you're shooting. A lot of mics, you have to take your hand off the controller to mute the mic or maybe go to your mixer. But here you can be shooting, just quickly hit this button and get right back to the thumbstick. So this is a really nice feature to have if you're streaming, you want to mute your mic a lot, or you're often playing with the squad and they're yelling at you for you're never muting your mic. So this is a great entry controller. However, I do feel like you pay for what you get here, and this is a very lightweight controller and almost feels like it's kind of been made in a cheap way. So in my opinion, I would move up to one of the more premium PowerA controllers. They feel a lot heavier and a lot more well built and have actually lasted a lot longer. This one only lasted about 3 to 4 months for me. I play, every single day, so some controllers go pretty fast. So this one kind of wore out pretty fast on the thumbsticks, and I was kind of not happy with the quality. But like I said, for the other PowerAs for me, those are my go-to. So we're going to get to that one next. Next up is personally my favorite controller and my daily driver on stream. And that term just really makes me laugh, so I wanted to kind of squeeze it into the video. But seriously, this is the PowerA Spectra, and this comes in at a price at just $40 USD. And this is basically the premium version of the controller I just went over. So if you missed that, you might want to go back. And again, if you did miss that, the reason why PowerA controllers are so inexpensive is because they are wired instead of wireless, and you save money on the battery. And the reason why this is my favorite controller is because it's $40 and it comes with a lot of great features like the buttons on the back where you can assign them to any button on the controller. So I have B and X. And then this controller also has trigger locks, which is really nice. A lot of less expensive controllers or cheaper controllers do not have the trigger locks, even though you can't really utilize them in the game that I play, which is PUBG, because of the driving. And then you can use the top button here to set one of the buttons, and then the bottom button here actually controls the LEDs, so you can turn them on and off. Obviously, this doesn't do anything for gameplay or quality of controller, but it is a fun feature. People love their RGB, and you can actually customize the RGBs as well, which is really nice. You can see on the top, just standard kind of trigger and bumper setup. What I really like about the PowerAs, again, is that this basically just feels like a regular Xbox controller. It's got the smooth top, which I actually like, and it's probably a little messy because I do use this every single day, and I only did a quick cleanup on this. But I like this controller because this and the next version, the Fusion, are very reliable, at least in my experience. I've had this controller for over 6 months and I'm only getting a little bit of drift for the first time. And this is very common for a lot of PUBG players because we're constantly doing this while we're looting not to get shot. And you have to understand that because I play every single day on stream, almost every single day, I usually go through a controller in about 3 to 6 months. So this is what prompted me to switch to PowerA because so many of my controllers were breaking, the warranties weren't working. I was getting screwed over by the Elite 2 controller. And ultimately I decided that for this, I could buy multiple of these in 1 year and still pay less than an Elite. So for that, I really like it. And I'm now obsessed with the buttons because I was not able to learn how to use the paddles correctly. I always hit them accidentally. And I almost never hit these buttons on accident. They just feel really good in your hands when you're trying to use them. So again, this is my favorite controller. And we're going to go on next to the Fusion, which I did use as well. And I also like that one a lot. And to complete the PowerA set, in front of us, we have the PowerA Fusion. So right now, this is the Fusion 1, and PowerA recently released the Fusion 2. So I'm going to use the price for the Fusion 2 because I feel like that's the one you would get right now because it's the most current. And this is the most premium version of the PowerA controllers, and you can tell because most premium controllers come in this kind of packaging nowadays. Comes with some different options for thumbsticks, which is nice, which we're going to go over. And you can tell right away that this controller has the look and feel of the Spectra, which is the middle version of the PowerA that comes in at $40. But there's no RGB here. And on the back, we actually have the option for 4 paddles, which is really nice. So this is kind of competing with the Elite, which is $180, and controllers like that with a little bit less options. We do have the trigger locks there as well. What's interesting about these paddles is you can remove them from here. You could actually put this top paddle in on the bottom paddle. The top one is shorter, the bottom one is a little bit longer. And then you can put them back in by kind of adjusting this. But this is a little bit of a flimsy process. And I will say that sometimes the paddles did fall out. So I would say this is kind of like a middle ground here. It's nice that it comes with 4 paddles for $63, but you also kind of are paying for what you get here. And again, obviously this is wired with no battery, but this is definitely the heaviest controller, the most premium feeling, but we also, again, lost the ability for the mute button and the volume there. But this was my favorite controller for a while. I actually wasn't even using the paddles, and this controller lasted basically until now. It still works. I actually just switched because I wanted to use the paddles. I mean, the buttons, excuse me. So this controller reliability wise was incredible. I couldn't believe how long it lasted for. That's what she said. But I was really happy with the quality of this controller. It made me kind of a lifelong fan of PowerA as of right now. Then the extra thumbsticks they come with is an extended thumbstick right here, a little bit longer. Or this might just be, yes, okay, so this is an extended thumbstick. It is longer than the regular thumbstick here. Kind of see if we can do a comparison. This is longer. And then this is an extended domed thumbstick, which some people, this is more of like a PlayStation controller. Sorry if this is not auto-focusing onto the dome, but this is a dome top. And then there's some accessories for the thumbstick here. So again, this was one of my favorite controllers, but I've just moved away from paddles. So I would recommend trying out the Fusion 2 if you can get your hands on it, if you're interested in something like this for the price of $63. But again, I'm still going to go ahead and recommend the PowerA Spectra as my #1 controller at $40 with the buttons over the paddle. And in front of us, we have the standard Xbox Microsoft controller. And I wanted to include this for the purpose of this video and also for the sake of comparison. The price point of this controller is $60 USD. And I've also seen people paying more money for this controller because the supply of this is so low. You can tell right away that Xbox has gone with the new omnidirectional D-pad here instead of just a traditional one, which is a nice upgrade. But other than that, this controller is pretty much unchanged over the years. And when you look at the price point of $60 versus the other controllers that offer so many things on the back, it almost looks like something is missing. But we do have to note here that this controller is wireless, so that is a great feature. And it also does have a great feel. There's a nice grip that's on the side of the controller here that feels really good when you hold it. And that also extends to the trigger, which is really nice. So overall, this does feel like a really premium controller. I love that it has this all black look, but obviously they probably come in some different colors as well. So it's a great controller, but Also, being an original product, an OEM product from Microsoft, you can't really trust their build quality anymore, at least from my experience. I've had some of these controllers break in just a few months, and some of them last almost a year, but some of them seem like in the last few years, they've gotten worse. And I used to buy custom controllers that looked really cool from Xbox, some Call of Duty ones, some different color ones. I bought a see-through controller, and all of those broke so fast that I just stopped buying these altogether. And again, now I've moved on to the button, so I won't go back to this, but this is a great option if you're just looking for the basic controller. But I would challenge people that old dogs like myself can learn new tricks, and I would definitely recommend trying to maybe move on and get a controller with some more features. Premium packaging check. Here is the Razer Wolverine Ultimate coming in at $140 USD. So there are a few different Razer controllers out there. There's a lower end version of this controller, and there's also a newer Wolverine V2 Chroma that comes in at $130. And I just want to highlight Razer right now because they are selling some interesting products out there, and I'll put all the links for these in the description box below and maybe in the comments. And something that I want to highlight here is that these controllers have so many features and also have the most buttons, but they're also not wireless. They're wired controllers as well. But something that makes this controller so unique is that not only does it have 4 kind of paddle triggers on the back, these are definitely different than normal paddles. You can see from this angle, this one has a little bit of give when this one has a little bit more. Actually, they're very quick to pull, and they look more like triggers than normal paddles, and they're kind of set in the middle. But there's also 2 additional buttons on the top here. And one of the craziest features about the Razer buttons is that a lot of them sound like you're clicking a mouse. I don't know if you guys can hear that. I'll maybe bring it towards the mic here. And the buttons are super fast to click. So I think this is a positive and a negative. The buttons are so easy to click that I found myself sometimes accidentally hitting the A button. So that's a negative, but on the positive side, if you can get used to this, you have insane response time with this controller, which is just amazing. And you can see right away that there's so many options here for $140. We have the 6 buttons that are all programmable. We have the really nice buttons. We have the thumbsticks here, which they come with 2 different thumbsticks in the D-pad. The D-pad has this kind of weird button thing going on, but you can also replace it with an Omni D-pad. And then what's really cool about the thumbsticks is that they pluck right off, and then you can put a different thumbstick back on, or say replace this thumbstick if it gets worn out or something. There's a magnet here, but I'm actually having trouble getting it back on. Usually it's very easy. But this is also my biggest downside with the controller are 2 things. A, the thumbsticks, and the controller design itself. So right away, you might notice that this controller looks a little bit different than a regular controller. It looks kind of fatter than a regular controller, and it feels different in your hands, especially because your fingers get kind of locked in because of the triggers. So you kind of see it more from here. Your finger gets kind of locked right here. You can't really move it because of all the audio options. So that's kind of a problem. And the controller just feels different. The back of the paddle feels different than a regular controller. And that kind of bothers me as soon as I pick it up. And I tried to push through it. I only used this controller for a few days, so I can't give you guys a reliability review. But the features here are just amazing. But again, what got me the most, my number 1 problem with this controller, and I know this is such a minor thing, but was actually the thumbsticks. So if you look closely, the thumbsticks are actually larger than a regular thumbstick, and they almost feel like they're flatter and longer, the surface. So when you put your thumbs on them, it just feels like a different kind of thumbstick, and they're very loose. And it's something that I could just not get used to. Even now, it kind of bothers me using the thumbsticks. They're just way too loose. And unfortunately, the only controller that I know that you can actually change your tension on the fly is the Microsoft Elite 2. Other controllers, you can either pick your tension when you buy them, or you're set to just whatever the default tension is. So there's not many options this way. So for me, this is just a no-go. I can't use this controller. I tried to get used to it over a few days and it just wasn't there for me. But if you think that the thumbsticks are not a problem, or some people love loose thumbsticks, they like kind of the looser feel, being able to move the thumbsticks around, then this might be one of the best options for you because the buttons are amazing. We have audio options. And again, just to repeat myself, we have 6 buttons on the back that are programmable and actually feel very nice to use. And they don't get in the way, but they get in the way of your fingers, but they aren't something that you would hit accidentally, which I think is really nice. So I'm going to put this higher up on my list, but again, you are paying a lot for this, but still under an Elite 2. And finally, we have the alleged gold standard in Xbox controller gaming. This is the Microsoft Elite 2, coming in at a whopping $180 USD. So I will preface this video by saying that I am salty about the Elite controller because I got burned by this controller and I definitely do not support them anymore. But it would be bias of me not to say that this is probably the best controller on the market, at least in terms of its design and functionality and all of the abilities that it has. But I do not trust the build quality on these controllers, especially because I've seen so many people come into my chat and so many of my friends get burned by this controller, even out of the box having issues, that to me, for that price point, it's just not worth it. And it's almost a crime. And honestly, there's been some class action lawsuits against this product because it's pretty crazy for $180 to have so many issues with a product like this. And there was many similar problems with the first version of the Elite. But hands down, it does have some of the best features. So let's go through. So first and foremost, standard Xbox controller here. We have the D-pad, and I think it comes with the Omni D-pad that you can change with, so it's nice. You can flip back and forth. Standard kind of premium options here where you can change different thumbsticks, concave, extended thumbstick, which is really nice. It has all of those different options. It comes with probably the most options. And then one of the most special features here, there's two really special features about this controller. One of them is that you can pop these thumbsticks off and actually change the tension, which I was mentioning before, but you might not have seen that one. This is the only controller that I know of where you can change your tension on the fly. Some premium controllers, you can set the tension before you buy them. Other times you just get the default tension. So this has 3 different levels, like soft, medium, and hard tension. And that's really nice for kind of picking out, how you want to play and your sensitivity and all that stuff. But this is also one of the biggest problems with the controller is that there's a lot of bad stick drift with this controller. And sometimes, like I mentioned before, even out of the box. This controller is wireless and does have a really nice feel, premium feel. Obviously, it's straight from Xbox. They're going to make it look and feel really good. The grips on the trigger. The controller is just amazing. Honestly, the way that it's designed is really incredible. The buttons feel good. Not as fast as the Razer, but sometimes I feel like the Razer is almost too fast, like I mentioned. And let's get into the paddles. So the paddles just clip in kind of like the Fusion 2. And remember that the Fusion is just $63. So you could buy almost 3 of those for the price of this one. But I will say that these fit in really nicely to the back of the controller, which is really, really nice here. And it just feels great. They fit right where your hand is. But again, it is kind of easy to hit these accidentally while you're playing. So again, for me, it just was something that was hard for me to learn and get used to. So I prefer the buttons. There's also, and what's nice is there's kind of a magnet here, so it helps them from falling out, which is nice, which is one of the problems with the Fusion 2 or Fusion 1 that I have. And then we have the standard trigger locks, which is really nice as well. So this has all the features and more, like I said, the tension lock. And then, which is probably the best feature of the Elite 2, is that there's great software with this where you can go in and kind of customize everything with the controller and even the trigger locks, which is amazing because on most trick controllers, you just have the trigger lock, you set it. Here's kind of the difference between here's the lowest trigger lock, and then here's the last one. You have to push all the way in. But when you put this low, in some games like PUBG, when you get in a vehicle, you can't accelerate because you can't push down all the way. But you can actually go into the options on the Elite controller and set it where you can accelerate even with just this much movement to the max acceleration, which is just amazing. There's so many curves and tension curves and things that you can change. And now that I'm thinking this, I want to mention that the Wolverine also has some software in game as well, but I didn't use it as much, so I can't really reference it like I can with the Elite, because I did play around with this a little bit. And again, this is the best design controller, but I absolutely cannot recommend this because I feel like you'll get burned. There is a limited time warranty on this thing for like 6 months, but it's probably going to break in 6 months, one day, kind of like what happened to me. And then also, there are some warranties sometimes through Best Buy, but I think they actually stopped giving out warranties on these controllers because so many people were using the warranties because they break so much. So for me, it just doesn't warrant the price. And a big shout out to Burn Suave, a friend of the stream, who's gone through like 9 of these. Every time they send him a new controller, even some new ones out of the box, they come with problems. And he is finally, I think, giving up. So they sent him refurbished ones, still broken. They sent him brand new one, still broken. He went to the store and bought a brand new one, still broken, still not working. So I just do not trust these. I can't say it anymore in chat, and the people in the stream know how salty I am with this controller. But here we go. Second most expensive one on the list, the Microsoft Elite 2. And last but not least, to round out our initial list, it wouldn't be a complete list if we didn't include a Scuf branded controller. And right now, the most popular one on Xbox is the Instinct and the Instinct Pro. However, this is going to be the most expensive controller on our list. The regular Instinct starts at $170 and goes all the way up to $210, while the Instinct Pro, which is probably the more common one I've seen people purchasing, starts at $220 and goes all the way up to $260. I also noticed right now that Scuf has gotten to the point where they are selling their controllers on Amazon, so you can get this gray edition for $230. But it's kind of safe to say that if you're going to be purchasing one of these, you're going to be on the lower side of $200 plus USD. So definitely a pretty penny for a controller, but I've heard a lot of good things about this one. I know a lot of people are using it. And if you're not familiar with the brand Scuf, they've been around forever. I mean, I remember people getting a Scuf controller 10 plus years ago. I've never had one because I wasn't into these customized controllers until recently. And on that journey, I've heard a lot of mixed reviews about Scuf. They've gone through some rough times as a company, but I feel like now they're better customer service, and I've heard better stories from them. But again, still the price here is definitely going to be a pain point, but I guess you pay for what you get. So let's hear what they have to say about this. So it says the Instinct was designed to live up to its name. 4 embedded rear remappable paddles, 3 configuration profiles, switchable instant triggers, interchangeable thumbsticks, and non-slip performance grip make this our most innovative Xbox controller yet. Play better, play faster, and I guess you also get a little bit of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate for free when you buy this controller, at least on the website. So I'm not going to lie here that reading that, it doesn't really sell me on spending this much money, because the triggers, interchangeable thumbsticks, grip, and all that stuff are basic features on a lot of nice controllers nowadays. And actually, if you just get the regular Instinct, it doesn't even come with the grip or some of these other features for $170. So I'm not really sold there. But let's hear from my buddy Salty Branzino. He's a friend and also a fellow streamer. I reached out to him because I know he loves this controller. He owns one. And he said that there's a lot of pros, that the stick tension is perfect, visually customizable, really good grips on the back. Triggers feel great, especially when you turn on the mouse click feature. Makes firing single fire weapons really great. And it's extremely responsive face buttons as well. And he said the con for him was the price point, and that 2 of the 4 back buttons were in a weird spot. You'll kind of notice that the back buttons are set up in like a butterfly position. So I could see that, being hard to maybe hit one of them or accidentally hit one side of those. It's kind of a unique setup. So you'd have to kind of gauge if that's something that you want to try out or not. And again, it seems like this is a mix of almost like an elite controller, sort of like in the Razer category. The only thing I'm worried about is that I don't know if there's software to control the trigger locks, which the Elite is the only controller I know that has that. So you can kind of customize it just to be exactly where you need it, which is cool. And also the Elite is the only controller I know of where you can change the tension on the fly. I don't think you can change the tension of the Scuf. So if you're going to be paying this much money, I would almost go for the Elite, even though I don't trust the quality of it. But I just feel like for this kind of price, I would want to get the maximum amount of features, but obviously that's up to you guys. This does seem like a good option, and I know a lot of great players that are using this controller. Just make sure that you have some kind of warranty figured out in case there's a problem. You don't want to be burned on spending this much money on a controller. All right, and next is our first bonus controller. This is the Victrix Gambit. And again, I'm adding these in after the fact, post my tweet. I saw this one mentioned a few times in the reply, so I wanted to do this one first. And it's really interesting. So I'm going to be honest, I never heard of this controller. I put it into Amazon. You'll see that it's listed as $100, $99.99. It has 4-star reviews, so we're heading into premium territory. And what I found interesting about this controller is that it's marketed as the world's fastest licensed Xbox controller. And it says that it has dual core technology. So it has 1 core to handle all of the button pressing and 1 core to handle all of the audio functions. So I'm guessing that a standard controller only has 1 processor or 1 core, and this one has 2. So this is a really interesting claim. And you'll see at the bottom here, the marketing, instead of an asterisk, they have a 1. That there was independent lab testing of Xbox controllers, yada, yada, yada. And apparently this is faster. And this totally makes sense to me. And if you look through the reviews, and also I want to shout out a friend on Twitter, Frank Shepard Tatter. I messaged him because he had this controller and I asked him for the pros and the cons. So I made a little list here to share with you guys. So apparently this controller is super, super fast, super responsive, and it actually is a pretty good controller. But some of the issues with this controller, it seems like is the shape is the biggest issue, that it's wider than a normal controller. And I know for a lot of people, including myself, like I really need the controller to be like an Xbox controller because I've been using them for so long. I mean, I'm sure you could get used to a wider controller, but that can definitely be a problem. And also, some people mentioned that some of the paddles can be harder to hit because they're set into the controller. I could totally see that. That could be a good thing because maybe you won't hit them as easily. but if you're used to regular paddles, you might not like that. And then some people said there's also some issues with the dead zone, which is interesting. So that means the thumbsticks maybe aren't that responsive, but in terms of like triggers, the bumpers, the buttons, and the responsiveness of the controller, people said it's just absolutely ridiculous. Kind of reminds me of the Razer. The buttons on that feel really good. So if you're interested in trying something like this, the shape doesn't bother you, then maybe try this out. But again, I haven't used this controller, so I can't fully recommend it. It's interesting, but I would pass on this one because of the shape and some of the negative reviews. And this next bonus controller is actually pretty surprising, so I hope you guys stick around for this one. It came out of nowhere, and I've never heard of this one again. So I saw a few replies that mentioned the 8BitDo or 8BitDo, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. It's a very weird name, and then when I clicked on the link for this controller, it looked absolutely huge and retro, so I thought it was a joke at first, that this was kind of like a meme controller. I almost thought it was like a stuffed controller, like a plush kind of thing. Turns out this is a real controller, and the shape is actually really similar to a regular controller. So at first glance, I got the complete wrong idea of what this controller is. So I guess don't judge a book by its cover. And they actually are marketing towards people who want a retro controller feel. And I'm sure there are some people out there that want this. So the controller size, again, is kind of the same. And then what's crazy about this is that this controller is $45, $44.99, and does come with 2 buttons on the back. So if you're interested in getting a more retro feel controller, or you want to try out a controller that has 2 buttons in the back, this is a great one to try out for $45. I feel like you get a controller. If you don't like it, it could be a backup. But again, it does have a different shape. So for me, that kind of does bug me. I don't know if I would do that, but if you don't mind that kind of stuff, this could definitely be for you. And then also I noticed that they're listed as a small business on Amazon. So I feel like that's really cool. I love supporting small businesses. So if this is something up your alley, I immediately think of my buddy Cookies, who is a retro gamer who also plays PUBG. This might be something perfect for him or maybe for you. But again, for me, it's probably a pass. I'm going to stick with PowerA. And our final bonus controller is the Turtle Beach Recon, which is currently listed on Amazon for $59.95, so $60. And again, if you're just skipping to this part of the video, I do not own any of the bonus controllers, but people in my community use these controllers. So we're including this at the end of my controller review video to kind of have some comparable options. I'm going to have an Excel sheet with all the different controllers, prices, features, and all that stuff, so you guys can compare for yourself if you're in the market for a new controller. And I do know a few friends that use this controller, so I definitely had to include it. And what's cool about this is it's $60, so it's the price of a regular controller. You get the buttons on the back, which is pretty much standard for any of these off-brand controllers that are competing in the Xbox market. And then also you get a bunch of audio controls on the top of the controller, which is really nice, especially if you're streaming and you're trying to mute yourself or change audio while you're streaming and talking to chat and stuff like that. So I do like having audio like this, but it did read some reviews that sometimes when you go to hit the guide button, that people were accidentally hitting these buttons because they were right above the guide controller. And I think my friend has mentioned that before. So I looked through a bunch of reviews on Amazon to make this video, and I found this one that seemed to summarize all of the reviews I saw and seemed to be the most fair and balanced. So I'm going to go through what this person said. So a big shout out to Michael K. So his pros are that the buttons on the back are programmable, semi-programmable, which is nice. The buttons, the paddles on the back. The controller is ergonomic. It definitely does seem that way. More durable than its competitors, which, you know, is kind of hit or miss depending on what controller you get. Sometimes it breaks quickly, sometimes they last a long time. And the cable is detachable, which is cool. The cons are that the sound controls don't work for PC, which is kind of a bummer, but it makes sense. Doesn't have software to set the trigger or stick dead zones. Again, you're really only going to get this with like the Elite 2 controller or heavily premium controller, so that makes sense to me as well. The sound control buttons make placement of the home, start, back unusual and easy to mistakenly press, which I mentioned before. I get that. And the cable lasted about 6 weeks, but was easy to replace. So I saw this in many reviews that people had issues with the cable and had to get it replaced. So that was bringing people's reviews down. It seems like a pretty decent controller. It has almost 3,500 reviews and it's at 3.5 star or 4.5 stars, almost 5 stars, excuse me. So I feel like if that many people are using it and having good experience, decent experience with it, then it's pretty solid. I would definitely recommend this without having used it. I would definitely try. It's got a similar shape as an Xbox controller. But for me, again, I'm sticking with PowerA just because it's what's working for me. But I would definitely give this a shot in the future for sure, especially from the reviews that I read. All right, so after a very long time, this controller comparison and review video is finally finished. And in conclusion, there's obviously no perfect controller out there. Because of all of the moving parts, including the thumbsticks, the triggers, the buttons, these controllers are bound to break over time. which is why I always recommend checking out the warranty information when you buy a controller, and also why I often recommend controllers with a better price to value ratio like the PowerA or Turtle Beach. In theory, you could buy backup versions of controller or multiple versions of these controllers and still spend less than going for an Elite 2 or a Scuf. But if you do want to go ultra premium and get the best of the best, I would recommend risking it for that Elite 2 or going for the Scuf, because those do seem to be like the best controllers out there. Just again, make sure you're tracking the warranty information. For a list of all of the controllers that I reviewed in this video, I'm going to have a Google Sheet shareable that you guys can check out in the description box of this video. And also has links to all these controllers on Amazon and some additional information. And if you want to support this video, you guys can subscribe right here on YouTube, check out my Twitch channel, buy a really cool Blitz 5 hat, or simply just like the video for free. As always, thank you all for watching. I'm Blitz 5, and peace out.